It's been about 4 years since Ford, and thus Lincoln, announced that they would cease production of all their sedan models due to a lack of demand in the American market. Lincoln's last sedan, the Continental, rolled off the assembly line in October of 2020.
But we're not filming this video in America. We're filming it here in China, where despite the growing popularity of SUVs and crossovers, automakers still sell plenty of sedans. Enough that Lincoln thought it worthwhile to develop this, the Lincoln Zephyr, and sell it exclusively here in the Chinese market.
With hands-on test drives and reviews of exciting Chinese market vehicles, Wheelsboy is the #1 source for China auto insights. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook. The Zephyr is the successor of the mid-size Lincoln MKZ and rides on the same C2 platform as the Ford Evos, which we've already reviewed, as well as the new Mondeo. The Zephyr has a starting price of $37,500 US, but our highly spec'd test car comes in at a little less than $50,000.
The Zephyr, known simply as the Lincoln Z here in the Chinese market, was jointly designed by two teams, one based in California and one here in China. The result of their labor is a sleek, fastback style sedan that looks good from pretty much every angle. It's a very contemporary design, particularly here on the front end, where we have a LED light bar that meets in the middle and a light-up Lincoln logo. Note the way that the LED light bar flows underneath the headlight and then terminates with an upward flourish.
The last generation of Lincoln sedans, namely the MKZ and Continental, had strong arching belt lines that carried from tip to tail. The Zephyr continues that tradition and even takes it a step further by tucking the belt line in above the front wheels, emphasizing both it and the wheel arches. Our Hollywood red test car was noticeably devoid of chrome, instead making liberal use of black plastic for a sportier look.
I often call out Chinese cars for taking design inspiration from other brands, so it's only fair that I point out the resemblance between the roofline and rear end styling of the Zephyr and the Audi A7. In both cases, you have a sloping roofline as well as a full-width LED taillight that has kind of a 3D floating effect. As is so often the case, the Lincoln Zephyr does not have an actual lift-back rear opening. Instead, it has a traditional trunk. It is 481 liters, which is pretty large, larger, for example, than that of a Lexus ES at 456 liters. It's less, though, than the 520 liters of the Mondeo. That's despite the fact that this car is actually slightly longer in overall length and shares the same multi-link rear suspension as the Mondeo. This thing does not have an electronically closing trunk, which, that's fine, not every car in this class does, but boy does it sound cheap when you close it.
The Zephyr offers a much more upscale experience on the interior as well, while sharing the basics with its more affordable cousins at Ford. The biggest similarity is the 1.1 meter display that combines a 12.3 inch instrument cluster and a 27 inch screen that serves both the driver and passenger.
We already experienced this screen in the Ford Evos, but I'll give you a quick introduction in case you missed that review. This thing is an honest-to-goodness 27 inches in length and can either operate as a single screen or, at the touch of a button, it can separate into two screens. Once you separate it into two screens, by taking 3 fingers like this and pushing on the screen, you can switch whatever is on the driver's side to the passenger side and vice versa at will. This system in the Evos used Ford's China-only version of their infotainment called Sync Plus. This car seems to use the same system but with a reskinned UI. Personally, I prefer the one in the Ford because the UI is a little bit simpler and easier to parse.
The design of the Lincoln's cabin is much more sophisticated than any Ford. That's especially true on the center console, which forgoes the rotary shift dial in the Fords for Lincoln's signature push-button design mounted on the dashboard. The area below that features a combination of physical switches and capacitive touch buttons. The large switch in the center allows you to change drive modes, while the switches on either side let you control the fan speed and temperature for driver and passenger climate zones.
I've been very vocal about the fact that I do not like capacitive touch buttons, and the Zephyr has done nothing to change my overall stance on that topic. However, I do want to give it credit for having very bright capacitive touch buttons, bright enough that I can actually see them under harsh sunlight conditions. That's not something you can say for the capacitive touch buttons in, say, a BYD or a Volkswagen. In terms of material quality, I would say the Lincoln finds itself in the same category as the other mainstay of American luxury, Cadillac. What that means is there's plenty of soft touch materials throughout, but material quality takes a real nosedive below the hit point. The Zephyr has nearly all the features you'd expect in a Ford and then some. That includes a heads-up display, Ford's Co-Pilot 360 safety and driver assistance system, and highly adjustable, heated and cooled real leather and Alcantara wrapped seats. It also has a 13-speaker Revel audio system that outdoes the 10-speaker Bang & Olufsen system in the Fords.
Some of you may have noticed that I said nearly all the features you can find in a Ford. That's because while the Lincoln has 128 different colors for its interior mood lighting and even a fragrance dispenser, it doesn't have the augmented reality instrument cluster we found in the Evos and Mondeo. We found that feature to be pretty useful, so we were left scratching our heads as to why the Zephyr goes without it.
The wheelbase of the Zephyr is 2,930 millimeters. That's actually 1.5 centimeters shorter than that of the Mondeo and the Evos. Now, 1.5 centimeters isn't going to make a whole lot of difference, but I find it interesting that what is ostensibly the luxury version of the Mondeo actually has a shorter wheelbase. As you can see, that doesn't mean there's not a ton of legroom in the back seat of the Zephyr. You also have a bunch of other features. For example, you have this fold-down armrest with cup holders and a storage area. You also have these classy little mirrors here that you can fold down, and 2 USB ports. There are AC controls, however, there is no third separate climate zone back here, so when you adjust the air conditioning, you're adjusting it for everyone in the car.
While the US market MKZ could be optioned with a turbocharged V6, making around 300 kilowatts or 400 horsepower, the sole engine option in the Zephyr is a turbocharged 4-cylinder making 181 kilowatts and 376 newton-meters of torque. That's 246 horsepower and 278 pound-feet. That engine is backed by an 8-speed automatic transmission, putting power through the front wheels.
Front-wheel drive usually isn't part of the formula for a good sports sedan, and indeed, sporty is not a word that I would use to describe the way this car drives, despite the fact that it has very weighty steering and a serious power advantage over similarly priced German competitors. Then again, I don't go to Lincoln for sports sedans, I go to Lincoln for comfortable cruisers, and that's exactly what this car is. This car's simpler McPherson strut front suspension doesn't provide the same level of driving dynamics as, say, a BMW 3 Series. However, its combination of this suspension with multi-link rear end and a very smooth shifting 8-speed transmission provides a very comfortable ride and driving experience both in town and on the highway. I would say this car has 3 main advantages over its German rivals. The first one we've already discussed, and that's power. In order to have this level of power in a BMW 3 Series, you have to upgrade from a 325 to a 330. That means paying an extra $6,000 US over this car's sticker price. And that still won't help you overcome the other 2 advantages. The first one is in terms of size. This car has more interior space than even the long wheelbase China-only versions of those German sedans, like the 325 Li and the C-Class L and stuff like that. You also won't be able to overcome the features gap. There are no BMWs, Audis, or Mercedes-Benzes at this price point that have a giant screen like this and this kind of driver assistance and safety technology. I know you and I don't necessarily care that much about that. We care more about the driving dynamics, right? But there's plenty of buyers that would love to have a screen like this in their car. I guess the question I'm really trying to answer with this video is, how much are people outside of China, people who can't buy the Lincoln Zephyr, really missing out? My honest answer is, quite a bit. This is the coolest Lincoln that I've driven in quite some time. While something like a Lincoln Corsair might actually offer better value, it being a more practical compact SUV with a slightly more comfortable ride, a Lincoln Corsair will never be as cool as this Lincoln Zephyr. The Zephyr is everything that a Lincoln should be, a sophisticated, upscale version of a Ford. Unfortunately, it also suffers from some of the more traditional weaknesses of Lincoln, i.e. those luxury features that really aren't the way they should be. There are also some strange things when it comes to features that Fords have, and it doesn't for some reason. Still, you're left with a very handsome, very comfortable sedan. So if sporty driving isn't your main goal, it's actually a very good choice. All right, that's all for today's video. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook, as well as our brand new website. All those links are in the description below. As always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell.